Hello everybody, it's Jacquie here. This is an edition of From the Table, my weekly blog or vlog, however I feel like I need to do it this week. And what I'm going to do is start to change it up this year in 2019 a little bit differently to the way that I have done it in past years. Typically what I do is I bring stories that are from the table. So from my treatment table, from my experiences in coaching people, from doing body talk sessions with people. And the reason why I do that is because quite often one of the experiences that my clients have had, or one of the reasons why they've come to see me, is more often than not either a same or similar experience that you have encountered yourself. And when we share the information, it enables you to be able to understand about yourself and the world around you a lot differently, to be able to make changes, to be able to adopt the strategies that perhaps put out as a suggestion. And the idea is that you find harmony in your life more, you find harmony in your body more, your health improves, your happiness improves, your relationships improve. What I'm going to do this year is I'm still doing all of that. However, every single month we're going to have a particular theme or an agenda that we're going to be focused on. Now, for the past 3 years in the My Incredible Orbit community, we've been doing this anyway. We get together every month and we do 3 focused group body talk sessions on that one concept or agenda that brings enormous change to a person's life. And then we have a few little training sessions and coaching sessions that we do on the side as well. It's worked so well discussing these concepts and doing body talk sessions on these concepts. What I want to do is take some of that and bring it now to you and give you a taste of that. So whatever the agenda is that we are focusing on in the community for that month, I'm going to bring that over and we're going to discuss that in these videos and blogs. So for January 2019, we are looking at one of the 5 senses, and it's hearing. And I've simply called it I Hear, because majority of people have a profound inability to be able to hear clearly, externally and internally. So what does that mean? We have 2 branches of the sense of hearing. One is called the normal and one is called the subtle. That's what we refer to it as. The normal sense of hearing is more like, well, I can hear myself talking now. I could hear my cat if she started meowing. I can hear the beagles in the background, and I can certainly hear the birds even through my earbuds here. The subtle sense of hearing relates more to the ability to be able to hear other frequencies and other forms of communication. So I can hear animals' internal voices. I can hear the internal dialogue within a client or within another person. When somebody says to me, I'm doing so well, and actually their internal voice says, I've had a really crappy couple of weeks. That is both the normal aspect of sound that comes out and then the internal aspect of sound that they have within them, which means that I get to hear what comes out of their mouth, and I also hear their internal dialogue. One is the normal aspect, the other one is the subtle aspect. There are many people, myself included, who are able to hear communication that comes from people who are passed over. When I'm doing a body talk session with somebody and perhaps their liver comes up as a priority and the liver's not very happy and the liver's not doing very well, that liver will take on its own voice. It has its own personality. I can hear what it says. I can interpret what it says. You also have the ability to be able to do that. You might think that you don't, but you do, okay? There's a way that we can harness this. And I think if you just become curious about the way that you work and the way that you are designed to experience life and highly function, then it just sets you off on this beautiful journey of discovery and exploration and this return journey to self, which I am just so passionate about for people. Hearing is such a important and valuable sense to actually start off this next huge series of from the table episodes that we're going to be doing, because after hearing comes sight, smell, taste and touch. In all of that, we're going to be very heavily focusing on intuition, instincts, insight, foresight, hindsight, psychic abilities, the gut brain / etheric brain function. That's all going to be woven in there as well, because you technically can't separate them out from one another. We can talk about them as though they are individual things, but they all need to work, and there's a beautiful synchronicity for all of that to be able to function very well within you. So rather than separating out any of that and you missing lots of information, I actually would prefer to bring them all in together and we talk about it all at the same time. In relation to your sense of hearing, it is the one that is activated the most while you're still in utero, at your birth, and then at the time of transition or death, it is the one that is still most active for people. A huge thing to be aware of, which majority of people are not, is that whilst you were still in utero, one thing that profoundly affected you, and actually a particular part of your brain, so within your brain you have this one section, it's actually a really gigantic section, not a wee little bit but a very big bit, and it's called the limbic system, or the limbic part of the brain. Now that limbic part of the brain was going through epic proportions of development, growth, wiring. The way that it put itself together and grew is largely dependent on what your experience was in utero of your parents. So what your parents' experience was while you were still in utero, what their attitudes were, what their beliefs were, what they would trigger towards, what they would retract from, their habits, their patterns, especially their behaviours. All of this was actually collected as sensory information and brought in through the sense of hearing. It then comes up through you to be logged as information, memory information. But then that also had a very profound impact on the development of your limbic system. And it is more often than not the reason why people experience this fight, flight, freeze process for the majority of their life. Now, for some of you, this will be brand new information, but it will sound true to you. Some people are aware that they're really born into a state of fight, flight, freeze. They mightn't know why, but they've been aware that to some capacity they've experienced life like that. For other people, you'll be hearing this for the first time and saying, you know what, that feels like me. That sounds like me. I feel like, to some extent, I've experienced life in either some level of fight, flight, or freeze. And quite often, freeze will be a first experience for somebody before they move into fight, or they'll experience freeze and then move into flight. Sometimes people just stay in freeze. They just stay frozen, right? The great news is that we have an unbelievable chance to be able to do some great work with this and turn it around. It is absolutely possible to completely 360 transform this, to completely rewire the limbic system, and to completely get your fight-flight system back into a working process where it's functioning in a really healthy way. So let's talk about your sense of hearing some more. Have you ever wondered how you can hear something that is being said by somebody, and the person that is next to you hears it in a completely different way? You'll often think, you're like, what planet are you on? Did you hear what I was listening to? That's really, really common, and it has to do with distortions through the subtle sense of hearing and through the normal sense of hearing. Or how about, you could be listening to someone speaking, you're replying to them, but they keep saying to you, you're not listening to what I'm saying, you're not understanding what I'm saying. And you keep listening, but you keep interpreting it in a particular way. And you say to them, I hear what you say, you're saying this. And they say, no, I'm not saying that. It can feel like you're on two different planets. It can feel like you are so out of sync. And I've lost count how many times over the years I've worked with couples or family members or even friendships where this has been going on, where there's conflict that's come up because of this very thing. What's happened is that your sense of hearing, or their sense of hearing, has become so filtered that they're not able to truly hear what is going on around them in the world. In next week's edition of From the Table, I'm actually going to explain the way that the five senses work, because there's a pretty intricate filtration system that we have on all of our five senses, and it's pretty complex the way that they work and where the information comes from and how this filtration system can get really, really blocked. So keep your eyes out for that one. What we're going to do is we're going to move on, because I want to give a couple of brief explanations from my time in clinic and working with people on how the sense of hearing can be so impacted. Firstly, I'll introduce a lady by the name of Jane. So Jane, I was working with probably about 3 years ago. She originally came to see me and she said, look, I'm married, I have a couple of children, I have a great job, my husband is attentive, he adores me, we have a great relationship. But she said, I feel like he doesn't really love me. Even though I know he loves me, I feel like he doesn't love me. I struggle with feelings like I don't fit, not just with him, but anywhere in the world sometimes. I feel useless sometimes, I feel worthless. I don't feel like I have any purpose, even though on the outside to everyone it looks like I'm loving life, achieving things in life, I have a great job. She said, just a lot of the time I just don't feel like I have any purpose at all. Now, this was a wonderful session to actually do. It was really big. What came up was that her mum being pregnant was like a massive surprise, a big shock, unplanned. Because what presents as information is the family's experience of her coming along. The other thing that was really obvious was the different reactions and the different feelings that each of her parents had. So it was almost like her mum was shocked, but then moved through that state of shock into, okay, well, let's get on with it type of thing pretty quickly. However, with the dad, it was almost like there was shock and stuck in shock, and then no real moving off the mark from that. Just not okay with it. I'm in shock. What do you mean? And like just pretty well staying in this spot. And I said to her, look, do you know, were you a planned pregnancy? Were you meant to be coming along and everyone was ready for you? And she said, oh no way. She said, Mum always tells me, even to this day, how unprepared she was for me. She said, I turned up when they had no idea that I could even possibly turn up. And then I said to her, do you think possibly that your mum's experience of you coming along was a little bit easier than your dad? And she said, from what I understand, yes. He never really got over it. Two things happen in that moment, is that it just brings it to the conscious mind's attention. This is what we're working on addressing at the moment. And it also starts this healing process where we can actually bring about change. What was coming up was the way that the memory from this experience, so a lot of people sort of have this feeling or this belief that you really don't remember when you're in utero, you really don't remember when you're a baby. You do. Majority of the time, people do not remember consciously. Some people do. I've worked with a ton of those people, but majority of the time, you don't consciously remember what something looked like, felt like, smelt like, tastes like from in utero, but also then in those first, 3 or 4 years, right? So her sense of hearing had really remembered and stored the information very clearly about what that conversation looked like when her mother had found out that she was pregnant, the shock, the conversation that happened between her and her dad then, and his almost rejection to the whole process. So, I didn't plan for this, I didn't want this isn't part of my story, what are we going to do now? It's like everything had fallen apart, all his world was upside down, and he just didn't cope with it very, very well. So that information from that conversation and that experience logged very, very deeply within the limbic system of her brain. It associated with her sense of hearing and sort of attached itself like little filters on the sense of her hearing. Also, with his sense of smell, that has a lot to do with safety. So in that moment, she also didn't feel very safe, because there is always a potential then that they decide not to go through with the pregnancy, that they are not loved, not wanted, not, held as valuable. And then with the sense of touch, that's all about feelings. So it had logged very deeply within her what that felt like. It felt like being lost, being abandoned, not having any purpose, not being valued, not being appreciated, all that kind of thing. All of those memories and experiences that had attached themselves to the 5 senses and then logged as very deep memory within her limbic brain was still continuing to play out on a day-to-day basis for her. So all of her fears were manifesting in her relationship, were manifesting in her lack of self-confidence, and in her, I was going to say relationship with herself, but it was severely impacting and breaking down her relationship with herself and giving her their ability to be able to truly, truly know herself. From that session, once we finished doing that session, we implemented everything. She emailed me a couple of weeks later just to say what a profound turnaround that she had had, that she was feeling like she was experiencing love. And she said, I feel loved. I feel valuable. I feel like I actually have purpose now in this world, and so that was a really, really wonderful experience. But I remember she then set off on this path of real discovery about what she liked and what she wanted to do, and perhaps what she wanted to learn and everything like that. So that was a really great experience and example of how the sense of hearing can get so impacted from in utero. Another example of how the sense of hearing can get impacted. This is not just one session that I've done with one person over the years. There are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of sessions and people that I've worked with that this relates to. And it has to do with the internal voices, right? So you're constantly aware of and paying attention to this internal dialogue. You're hearing and interpreting internal dialogue. We have the ability to be able to change profoundly the internal dialogue, which means that you will hear it differently, which means then your experience of yourself will be different. Your experience of the world around you will be different, especially fantastic for those people that have really, really struggled with self-love, with self-esteem, with anxiety, with depression, with confidence, anything like that, right? So the sense of hearing is very, very heavily involved in all of those factors where we can really turn it around quite quickly and substantially. The last one that I want to share with you, and this is a great one because it shows you how the physicality of the sense of hearing and the body actually gets impacted. I worked with this elderly gentleman quite a few years ago. He had tinnitus, so ringing of the ears. And he came in to see me because he had the tinnitus. He didn't actually want it anymore. Yes, he did have a little bit of sound damage, ear damage due to, being on heavy machinery in his early 20s and not wearing any hearing safety equipment or anything like that. But all in all, he should have had decent hearing without the tinnitus. The biggest thing that came up as a priority was his wife's voice. And I go, what is it about voice that we need to look at here? And he goes, oh my God. She just goes on and on and on. She won't let up. She won't let me sit down for 5 seconds. She's on my back all the time. And I said, well, your tinnitus is actually blocking out her voice. Your entire body-mind complex has figured out a way to be able to drown it out and block it out so that you can exist in your own little world. Because he has tinnitus, because he can't hear her, she gave up. She stopped nagging. She stopped speaking to him because she would find that she would speak to him or try to say something to him and he couldn't hear a word that she was saying, so she just stopped, right? So his body-mind complex had figured out a way to make it stop. It wasn't the best way to actually make it stop. It wasn't the most productive way to actually find resolution, but it was a way. And that's the brilliance of the body-mind complex, is that if your body-mind complex has to figure out a way to come back to balance, to try and find harmony, it will just go searching for the easiest, most effective, quickest way that it can do that. And sometimes it is actually not the healthiest. Sometimes it's not the best. So that's actually what we're doing sometimes in a body talk session, is that we're rewriting the way that your body-mind complex has figured out a way to be able to do something, to be able to cope with life. And we're going to impart a brand new pattern, brand new program, brand new way of doing things and experiencing life. But I always remember that session because it was a bit funny, and I said to him, now, do you really want us to take away the tinnitus and for this to be removed? Maybe we do work on the matrix of your relationship. Would that be better? And he's thought about it, gave it some very serious consideration. He was seriously thinking about keeping the ringing in his ears for a while. And then his better sense came in and he said, you know what, I would rather have a great relationship that works well than my ears doing this because I can't cope. And he just recognized in that moment that his body-mind complex was doing it that way because he just couldn't cope. And that was his best way of being able to deal with it. So, really great session, wonderful outcome as well, because he only really needed about 3 or 4 sessions, if memory serves me correctly, and his tinnitus resolved itself and they improved their relationship, which was beautiful. Okay, so I hope this has given you some food for thought. Perhaps something I've mentioned has resonated with you in relation to your own experience in life. Maybe, a family member or a friend has popped up as I've given you some examples. So as we go through the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to share more experiences from the table with you. Next week, I'm going to talk to you about how the filtration system on your 5 senses actually works and how you get the sensory information from outside your environment in through your 5 senses so that you can interpret it and just be able to perceive your reality. I would love to know if you have any questions from this at all, or if you've had your own experiences, then let me know in the comments, shout out, join me on social media, tag me in the comments so that it makes sure that I get the comment and that I can reply to you. And if you have any questions for me and you would like me to discuss it next week, then send it in by email, info@JacquieMcIntyre.com. Until then, thanks for joining me and see you soon. Bye.